This first depth chart is finally here, and while a lot of it looks exactly like we expected, there are definitely a few decisions that caught me off guard. Some battles are starting to get really interesting, and with the first preseason game coming up, we're about to find out which of these early rankings actually hold up on the field. So stay with me until the end as we discuss the latest news. Make sure to hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Are you excited to see the Hawks on the field? I want to know. The Seahawks' first unofficial depth chart of the 2026 NFL season is here, and with the first preseason game against the Dallas Cowboys coming Saturday, we finally have an early picture of where Seattle is placing players across this roster. Most of the names are exactly where you would expect them to be, but there are several decisions that immediately stand out. And because this is only the first unofficial depth chart, what makes it interesting is not simply who sits at number 1 today, but which battles could change quickly once preseason games and joint practices begin providing more evidence. At quarterback, there really is no surprise at the top. Sam Darnold is QB1. The much more interesting situation is directly behind him, where the battle between Drew Lock and Jalen Milroe remains unresolved. Milroe has not beaten out Lock yet, but Lock has not done enough to make the competition disappear either. That makes this one of the battles worth following throughout the preseason. Both quarterbacks should have opportunities to get significant work, including during joint practices, and there is no need for Seattle to rush into declaring its QB2. Let the competition continue. See who separates himself, and make the decision when there is actually a reason to make it. The backfield brings considerably more intrigue. Robbie Oasts is listed but injured, while Brady Russell sits at the top of the fullback group. There is also the possibility that Brock Lamp eventually becomes the primary fullback, while Russell remains involved on special teams. But for now, the depth chart gives us Seattle's first official indication of the order. Zach Charbonnet appears toward the back because of his injury and his continued presence on PUP. So there is nothing particularly shocking about that placement. The real attention should go to George Holani, because Holani is sitting in the number 1 running back position. That is significant, because another player who has made a strong impression during camp is Jackery Krosky-Merritt. Based on his camp performance, there was an argument that he could have done enough to receive that first billing. Instead, Seattle has Holani at number 1, and Holani has earned the opportunity to try to keep it. But nobody should interpret the first unofficial depth chart as a permanent declaration. The running back order could change before Seattle even reaches its second preseason game. Holani being first today does not guarantee that he stays there, just as another back moving ahead later would not necessarily mean the competition is finished. This is exactly the kind of position where rotation throughout training camp and the preseason can tell us much more than one sheet of paper. Holani has spent much of camp operating as the number 1 option and has been in Seattle longer, so there is logic behind his placement. Now the challenge becomes holding that position when the games begin. The possibility of movement makes this battle especially interesting because Seattle can continue giving opportunities to multiple backs before determining who has truly separated himself. One week it could be Holani sitting first, and another week the order could look different. For now, however, the first depth chart belongs to Holani. Then we get to tight end, and this might be the decision that creates the most immediate debate. A.J. Barner is exactly where you would expect him to be, but Eric Sauber being placed ahead of Elijah Arroyo is a genuine surprise based on how Arroyo has performed during camp. Sauber is an experienced player, but Arroyo has put together a strong camp and brings value as both a blocker and a pass catcher. Barner and Arroyo have the potential to be an important combination because of what they can provide in both areas. So seeing Arroyo outside that second spot catches the eye. This is also different from a situation where a rookie might initially be placed behind a veteran simply because Seattle wants the younger player to earn his way upward. Arroyo is no longer a rookie, and his camp performance has given him a legitimate argument for a higher position. The depth chart currently says Sober is ahead, but that does not necessarily mean the same order will remain when Seattle reaches Week 1 against the New England Patriots. That is what makes these unofficial depth charts so fascinating. They provide information, but they also create questions that can only be answered on the field. Arroyo now has an obvious opportunity in front of him. If his strong camp continues into preseason action, Seattle could eventually have a decision to make about that number 2 position. At wide receiver, there is considerably less controversy. Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp are sitting at the top, followed closely by Rashid Shaheed and Torrey Horton, with Jake Bobo also appearing in the group. Nothing about that arrangement should create the same level of surprise as what we saw at tight end. Kupp belongs in that number 2 position until somebody takes it away from him. He has had tremendous success during his career, and the information coming out of camp has also been positive. That means the players behind him have a straightforward challenge. If they want to move up, they have to earn it. For the moment, Seattle's initial order makes sense. Then we reach the offensive line, and this is where another placement deserves serious attention. Bryce Stevens is listed as a third-string guard, while Christian Haynes is sitting at number 2. That raises a major question, because Stevens, Mason Richman, and others have performed well enough to at least create an argument for movement in that part of the depth chart. Haynes remains ahead of them for now, but the preseason could put that positioning under pressure. The depth chart cannot simultaneously be dismissed as meaningless and then ignored when a player who has performed well is sitting lower than expected. Seattle has made a choice with the initial order, and now those younger players have a chance to force the team to reconsider it. That is one of the biggest reasons Saturday matters, even though the result itself will not count toward the regular season. Individual performances matter. Reps matter. Competition matters. For players sitting second, third, or even lower on this first chart, preseason football is an opportunity to make the current order impossible to maintain. On the defensive side, there are fewer dramatic changes, but there is an interesting adjustment involving the positions themselves. Leonard Williams and his group are now listed at defensive tackle, while Jarran Reed is listed at defensive end. Beyond that positional designation, the order is largely what was expected. The first players are where you would anticipate, followed by the second and third options. One younger name to watch in that interior group is Uchenna Nwosu. No, Nwosu belongs to the edge discussion. The name highlighted among the younger interior defensive linemen is Riley Mills. The supplied material specifically points to Uso Samalu, and because this depth chart discussion has to remain faithful to what was provided, that is the player identified in the source as someone to watch. At edge rusher, the overall structure again contains few surprises, but there could eventually be more rotation involving Dante Fowler Jr. and Uchenna Nwosu. Both have been in the league for a significant amount of time and have shown they can be successful. Behind them, the bigger question is whether some of the younger players currently sitting third and fourth can climb the depth chart and establish themselves as legitimate options. And then comes linebacker, where the starters are not really the mystery. Ernest Jones IV, Drake Thomas, and Tyrese Knight occupy the important positions in this group, and Knight provides Seattle with considerable strength, even though he is not expected to be the starter. The real competition is further down the room. Patrick O'Connell and Chaz Surratt are battling for a place, with Chris Paul Jr. also part of the conversation. When a position group already has 3 players viewed as legitimate starting-level options, there simply are not many openings left. That turns every preseason opportunity for the players behind them into something much more important than an ordinary exhibition rep. And this is where the first unofficial depth chart really becomes valuable. It is not a final answer. It is a snapshot of where these competitions stand before Seattle faces Dallas. And some of the most interesting stories are coming from the places where that initial order could be challenged almost immediately. So after seeing Holani at the top of the running back group, Saubert ahead of Arroyo at tight end, and Haynes ahead of some of the younger offensive linemen, what do you think is the biggest surprise on this first Seahawks depth chart? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay well informed. Go Hawks!